Hi, welcome to Sociological Lens. I am Dr. Dilsora Fozilova. In today's lecture, we are going to talk about deviant sports subcultures. We talked about deviance and subcultures many times in our previous lectures, but let's start by clarifying what we mean by deviance and subculture. Deviance refers to behaviors that deviates or stray from social norms or expectations, while subculture is a group with beliefs or values or interests that differ from broader culture or society. So when we talk about deviant sports subcultures, we are looking at groups within sports that not only have distinct identities, but also challenge or reject mainstream norms within athletic communities. Examples might include extreme sports subcultures, ultra competitive, gaming, or niche fan groups. These subcultures often redefine success and achievement in ways that reflect broader social tensions around competition, identity, and sometimes resistance to authority. Understanding them helps us to see how sports or sports groups reflect and sometimes resist social norms. Why this is important? Discussing deviant sports subcultures is essential as it challenges us to think about the boundaries of social norms, conformity, and identity within athletic communities. Deviant sports subcultures often bring forward topics like resistance to authority, risk taking, and redefine social ideas of success, which can shed light on the broader social and cultural dynamics. Further research in this area about deviant sports subcultures can help us to understand how these groups reflect and influence societal trends, the role of media in shaping public perceptions, and how identity and belonging are constructed outside mainstream sport. Deviant sports subcultures emerge for various social, cultural, and individual reasons. At the core, these subcultures often challenge mainstream norms and expectations of traditional sports culture, providing an alternative space where participants can express their own identity, defy authority, and seek personal freedom. Some of the primary reasons can be, for example, resistance to mainstream stream sports norms. Deviant sports subcultures can form as a reaction to strict rules, commercialization, and intense competitive or traditional sports. Participants often seek a more inclusive, less rigid or regimented environment where they can focus on creativity or self expression in community rather than conformity and professional success. Many deviant subcultures, sports subcultures, attract individuals looking for a sense of belonging or identity that mainstream sports might not provide. For example, skateboarding or street racing communities offer alternative identities and social bonds, often in contrast to mainstream athletic communities. Also, they can challenge social norms. Sometimes athletes are drawn to deviant sports subcultures because they allow a challenge to traditional values associated with sports, such as obedience, conformity, and respect to authority. These subcultures often celebrate risk taking, anti establishment attitudes, and pushing physical limits, which appeals to individuals looking to break down or break away from societal expectations. When we think about regular traditional sports, the human body and their capacity is taken into consideration, although they're pushed all the time with their, for example, the superiors or the coaches, right? The rebellion against societal control can be another reason. Many of the subcultures emerge in response to the restrictions of structured society, providing an outlet where individuals can rebel against norms. Engaging in sports that are often practiced in unconventional or forbidden spaces like parkour in urban settings provides an alternative form of self expression and physical engagement that feels free from external control. And also, I think media has a huge influence on subcultural appeal. Media portrays of certain edgy or rebellious sports can influence the growth of deviant subcultures by glamorizing or bring them to the light, or glamorizing their non-conformist aspects. These images circulate, they attract people who identify with the subcultures, intercultural values in athletics, reinforcing the distinct identities and lifestyles associated with this sports subcultures. Deviant sports, deviant sports subcultures thrive in spaces of both individual expression and collective resistance, often becoming rich communities with their own values, language, performance, and norms that contrast with critic or contrast or critic mainstream sports subcultures. Now we can reflect on again to our definition of deviant sports subcultures, which refers to the groups within the sports world that engage in behaviors or practices that deviate from the norms and values typically associated with mainstream sports. Now, we need to also understand that values and norms is quite wide in mainstream society. From one age to another age, there is a wide space. However, just deviating from the space is considered as deviant sports subcultures. These subcultures often challenge conventional ideas about sportsmanship, fair play, or societal expectations of athletes. For their action, trait, or idea that falls outside a range of acceptance. Now, when we're talking about this norms and values being quite wide, these actions or traits falling outside of that range of acceptance. Also, the norms are socially constructed. So defining this subcultures is quite complex because of that reason. Why defining defining deviant sports subcultures is quite complex. Defining deviant sports subcultures is complex because they occupy a space that often challenges, overlaps with, or deviates from mainstream definitions of both sports and deviance. Some of the examples can be subjectivity and cultural variation. Deviant sports subcultures don't have rigid boundaries. What is considered deviant or non-conforming can vary greatly depending on time, place, and societal values. For example, skateboarding was once widely viewed as deviant, but it's now a mainstream Olympic recognized sports form, right? This fluidity makes it difficult to categorize sports subcultures as strictly deviant or not. Evolving standards and norms, participants in deviant sports subcultures come from a range of backgrounds and have diverse reasons for their environment, involvement, and social rebellion to creative expression. This diversity means that individuals may have different views of what deviant means within the same subculture, complicating any single definition. Sports norms change over time. That evolving standards also complicates a consistent definition of deviance. Also, it's ambiguous between competitive aims and cheating. So that's why distinguishing between acceptable risk taking and actual deviance can be very hard as well. Participants in deviant sports subcultures um, also recognize deviance and norms of the mainstream culture differently. And also, they can have diverse motivations. Participants in diverse sports subcultures involve different kinds of um, the subculture shifts and commercialization. As certain groups, subcultures gain popularity, they often become commercialized and mainstreamed, blurring the line between deviant and conventional. For example, BMX biking or snowboarding were once part of countercultural movement, but now integrated into commercialized sports culture, further complicating how we define deviant. Deviance is socially constructed, and therefore meaning that behaviors labeled as deviance in one culture or time period might be accepted in another. This contextual nature makes it difficult to create a fixed definition of deviant sports subcultures, because what society considers deviance varies widely and can change rigidly. Within a deviant sports subculture, there is often a range of values, practices, and degrees of conformity. For instance, some members of subculture might prioritize anti-authoritarianism or nonconformity, while others might emphasize community building and skill development. This internal diversity means that a single universal definition does not capture the full scope of each subculture. Many deviant sports lack also formal competition, standardized rules, or governing bodies, which are hallmarks of traditional sports. This also blurs the lines it makes to determine whether some activities should be considered sports, recreational activities, or lifestyle practices, adding another layer of complexity in defining them as deviant sports subcultures. This inconsistencies of enforcement, commercialization, and celebrity culture in sports, and ambiguous terms between competitive edge and cheating, standards and norms, and various cultural variations makes it very hard to define deviance in sports or sports subcultures. These factors highlight the challenge of pinning down a static definition of deviant sports subcultures, as they are ever evolving and shaping by dynamic interplay of societal norms, individual motivations, and subcultural influences. In sports, deviance can manifest in two contrasting ways: deviant under conformity and deviant over conformity. These concepts refer to different forms of deviation from the norms, values, and expectations associated with sports culture, and they can help us to explain the behavior often found in deviant sports subcultures. Deviant under conformity occurs when individuals reject or fail to follow established norms, rules, or expectations. In sports, this could include actions like cheating, violating game rules, or resisting training regimens and team expectations. Underconformity might include behaviors like intentionally falling, breaking the rules for strategic advantage, or ignoring team guidelines. In extreme cases, underconformity can involve outright illegal actions such as doping or match fixing. One of my friends talking about coaching in certain groups, and they kind of get excited and organize certain kind of trainings for their groups, and instead of 40 people for soccer or handball, only like 5, 6, 7 people show up, and all this coaches and all this preparation, it just makes them very uncomfortable and angry when people don't show up in this kind of trainings. And that can be an example of deviant underconformity in sports. The relation, the relationship with deviant underconformity and sports subcultures is very complex. In deviant sports subcultures, underconformity is often a defining characteristic. These subcultures may challenge traditional sports norms on purpose, rejecting structural training rules and hierarchies. Skateboarding, for example, started as a form of underconformity to traditional sports standards where participants emphasized freedom and individual style over rules and organized competition. Deviant overconformity, on the other hand, refers to the excessive adherence to or exaggeration of the norms and values in sports to the point that it becomes harmful or extreme. Athletes may go beyond healthy limits by overtraining, taking performance enhancing drugs, or playing through serious injuries to meet or exceed expectations. Overconformity can include pushing through pain and injury to prove dedication, using performance enhancing drugs to meet elite standards, or overtraining to attain high performance levels at the cost of physical or mental health. These behaviors may be glorified, and usually glorified in sports, as they align with sports culture that values toughness and resilience and peak performance. They just call it like giving my all. Even they sometimes play their game through their injuries, which can cost them a lot of health, and then they can sometimes end up having very difficult situations. That is glorified in sports as we said, like giving their all. Although deviant sports subcultures often involve rule breaking, overconformity can also be present. Some subcultures like extreme sports, for example, base jumping or parkour, demonstrate overconformity by pushing physical and mental boundaries to dangerous extremes. Athletes may engage in risky behaviors to gain respect within the subculture or to challenge the limits of human capacity, illustrating an overconformity to the values of risk, freedom, and self-expression. Sometimes, like you can say, how about then renewing records, right? And we will talk about that in a bit. In deviant sports subcultures, both underconformity and overconformity are often present, but serve different purposes. Underconformity often represents a rejection of mainstream sports norms, fostering a culture of nonconformity and anti-authoritarianism. Overconformity, on the other hand, reflects an extreme dedication to the subcultural values such as risk-taking, defiance, and self-discipline, maybe, which are sometimes even stricter than those of mainstream sports. Some of the examples can be skateboarding, as we already mentioned, can involve both types of deviance. Underconformity in skateboarding through the rejection of traditional sports regulations, and overconformity, where participants push themselves to perfect high-risk tricks. So in one sports subculture, you can see both underconformity and overconformity. Members of these subcultures may earn status or identity through behavior that challenge the norms and limits of both mainstream sports and societal expectations. So deviant sports subcultures often blur the lines between underconformity and overconformity, as participants both reject mainstream sports standards and intensify adhere to their own alternative values. This dual approach creates unique spaces where both freedom from rules and commitment to subcultural ideal coexist. Now, let's take a look in various deviant sports subcultures and some of the studies done on them. Skateboarding has long been associated with rebelliousness and countercultural values. And in the beginning, initially, it was often seen as a deviant activity due to its connection to street culture. Law breaking, like skating, has been done in places that is prohibited areas, or it wasn't involved with some permissions from the cities. Therefore, they are considered as deviant. Although it has gained more mainstream acceptance in recent years, elements of rebellion remain central to the identity of skateboarding. One of the studies I picked to explain for this lecture is a study done by Lane Borden. In Lane Borden's influential study, Skateboarding Space and the City, Architecture and the Body, which is done in 2001, skateboarding is framed as a subculture of deviance where the activity transcends mere sport to become a forum of social and spatial resistance. Borden analyzes skateboarding through the lens of urban space and how skaters navigate, reinterpret, and reclaim these spaces in ways that often challenge societal norms or city planning or the laws of the city. Here's some of the key parts of his study. Borden argues that skateboarding turns everyday urban space, such as stairs, rails, and ledges, into playgrounds and performance spaces, deviating from their intended purposes. As you know, that there is norms around every space created in the city. For example, stairs, or just going up in the places, or bridges, or those kind of stuff, right? In doing so, skateboarders redefine public spaces, challenging the idea that cities are primarily for commerce, traffic, and orderly pedestrian movement. This reappropriation can be seen as the form of spatial deviance, which skateboarders reject and subvert the original sanctioned uses of urban architecture. I found it very interesting. This redefinition of space, or redefinition, is a symbolic form of resistance, as skaters reject the imposed restrictions of urban spaces. By using public and private spaces in unsanctioned ways, skateboarders challenge also the capitalist and commercialized interests embedded in the city planning, suggesting that urban environments should support varied and creative forms of expression beyond consumerism and efficiency. So this is kind of like a part of postmodern argument as well. They also challenge authority and societal expectations. Skateboarders often face scrutiny from law enforcement, security guards, city officials who attempt to limit or ban skating in certain areas. Borden argues or points out that skateboarding is inherently rebellious as skaters consistently pushed against these authoritative efforts to restrict their movements. This anti-authority stance aligns with the deviant nature of subculture, where skateboarders assert a right to the city, advocating for freedom and independence in the face of social control. Also, skateboarding's subcultures create a sense of belonging for those who may feel marginalized within mainstream sports or society. Borden notes that the collective experiences of navigating obstacles, defining regulations, and embracing a unique set of skills and values create a tight-knit community with shared identity. This subculture solidifies, strengthens their collective deviance as skateboarders see themselves as part of an outsider or community that resists assimilation into conventional sports of urban norms. Also, the athletic and kinetic aspects of deviance is explored by Borden. Borden highlights the performative and aesthetic elements of skateboarding, noting that it is not only about athletic skills, but also a creative reimagining of movements within urban landscape. Skaters turn functional spaces into art forms through their tricks and maneuvers and presenting an aesthetic that is both subversive and anti-mainstream. This makes skateboarding a form of cultural deviance where the act itself is a performance of resistance. Also, the risk and overconformity to subcultural norms is observable in this study. The high-risk nature of skateboarding or skateboarding tricks align with deviant overconformity, where skaters or performers push physical and psychological limits to achieve status within their subculture. This commitment to high risk behavior reflects their purpose to the subculture's values or commitment to the subculture's values of courage, creativity, and defiance of conventional safety norms. Also, it blurs the deviant and mainstream boundaries. Borden also addresses how skateboarding's mainstream popularity complicates its identity as a deviant subculture. With increased commercialization, skateboarding has gained visibility and economic value over time, with stake parts, merchandise, and even Olympic recognition. This raises questions about whether the deviant nature of skateboarding persists or is diluted as it becomes more mainstream. While some skaters embrace this visibility, others reject it, seeing it as a betrayal of original spirit of skateboarding as countercultural or deviant practice. Borden's analysis of skateboarding as a subculture of deviance highlights how skateboarding challenged the intended uses of urban spaces, asserts an anti-authority stance, and builds community through shared acts of resistance. By redefining urban space and expressing identity through creative moment and risk taking, skateboarding illustrates how deviant subcultures can resist and reshape societal norms, creating alternative ways to interact with the city. In Borden's view, skateboarding serves as both a physical and symbolic rebellion, questioning who has the right to the city and offering a unique example of deviance as a form of cultural expression. Roller derby is another sports with a strong subcultural aspect. It is a distinct example of deviant sports subculture, particularly in its challenge to traditional gender roles and its embrace of gritty countercultural identity. In their study of roller derby, the Becoming Roller Derby Girls, Paulitz and Polagar explore how roller derby functions as a space of resistance and identity formation for its participants. Their analysis emphasizes how this sports subculture, participants or derby girls, navigate issues of gender, power, embodiment, redefining what it means to be both an athlete and a woman. Some of the main points they make in this study is challenging gender norms and expectations. Roller derby players often adopt bold, confrontational, personal, and contrasts with mainstream feminine ideas, embracing aggressive, unapologetic identities on and off the track. Paulitz and Polagar note that these derby girls defy the passive or subdued femininity often expected of women in sports, opting instead for an empowering mix of toughness and individual expression. The physical nature of the sports and its aggressive gameplay allow participants to embody an alternative version of femininity that is assertive and strong. This performance of alternative femininity acts as form of deviance against traditional gender roles in sports, where femininity has historically been associated with grace, beauty, and less physical toughness. Roller derby players resist this image, embracing a rebellious identity and emphasizing resilience, skills, and power. Paulitz and Fulgar describes how roller derby players create and inhabit distinct alter egos or personas with names and styles that contribute to unique identity within the sports. These names are often edgy or humorous, blending elements of punk, gothic, and riot girl subcultures with which contribute to the roller derby deviant image. This alternative styling reinforces a strong sense of individuality within the shared subculture, where players actively distance themselves from mainstream sports culture. The expression of subcultural belonging is also one of the main elements in this study. Through their styles, alter egos, and community rituals, players create a sense of belonging that is central to the roller derby experience, which is also central to subcultures, definition of subcultures. This sense of solidarity in embracing an outsider status strengthens their subculture, where the participants see themselves as part of shared, unique, and empowering community that contrasts sharply with more traditional rule-oriented sports environments. Embodiment of physicality and resistance is also the element in this kind of sports subcultures. Roller derby involves a high level of physical contact, with players engaging in strategic aggression, blocking, and body checking. The authors argue that this physicality offers a unique way for women to resist cultural expectations that they should be delicate or reserved or soft or submissive, or all different kinds of definitions you can remember about females or gender, right? By embracing aggression and resistance, roller derby players challenge the and dictate social norms that dictate acceptable forms of female embodiment, redefining what it means to inhabit a female athletic identity. The emphasis on physical strength, endurance, and resilience in roller derby powers or empowers players by enabling them to own their bodies in ways that are often denied in other contexts. This deviance redefinition of femininity through physical skills and contact offers players a pathway to empowerment and self discovery that contrasts sharply with other sports, and also that reinforce gender norms. The authors also describe how roller derby leagues operate in a less hierarchical, more inclusive, and community driven manner. Roller derby leagues are often player owned and player managed, contrasting with the more rigid, institutionalized structures found in other sports. This format fosters a sense of ownership and autonomy that allows players to create and control their space, which reinforces the subculture's identity and as independent and deviant. The roller derby community often unites around shared values and inclusive diversity and solidarity, providing an alternative to the competitive, exclusive nature of mainstream sports. This communal ethos reinforces roller derby subcultural identity as players share an experience of defying societal expectations together, collectively supporting each other's journeys of empowerment and deviance. To summarize this study by Paulitz and Fulligers, this article or this authors argue that roller derby serves as both deviant and empowering space where participants redefine gender norms, reclaim their bodies, and develop resilient identities. Through its emphasis on physicality, alternative femininity, or in community-driven autonomy, roller derby functions as a deviant sports subculture that contrasts with both mainstream sports and traditional gender roles. It provides a space where women can redefine femininity on their own terms, embracing toughness, creativity, and community in a way that empowers them both individually and collectively. In this way, roller derby exemplifies how sports subcultures can act as a powerful spaces for identity formation and social resistance, challenging societal norms and expanding the possibilities of self. Combat sports, especially those like mixed martial arts and underground fighting, represent a distinct deviant sports subculture due to their intense physicality, raw nature, and challenge to traditional sporting norms. This subculture often embraces values of toughness, aggression, and resilience that differ from mainstream values of sportsmanship or decorum in traditional sports. Fighters within these communities may view themselves as outsiders to conventional society, bonded by shared experiences in a physically demanding, high stakes environment. Unlike other sports, combat sports tend to focus heavily on personal endurance, with participants often enduring extreme physical punishment, pushing the boundaries of physical limits and conventional standards of safety. Another study on mixed marital arts is called Caged Morality, Moral World Subculture in Stratification Among Middle Class Cage Fighters, was published in 2011. The authors are Abramson and Darren Modzelewski. So this study, authors analyze how MMA fighters navigate a moral landscape that is complex and often contradictory. Their study delves into how participants in cage fighting manage both their environment in a violent sport and their identities in a mainstream society, where violence and aggression are typically stigmatized. Abramson and Modzelewski, just a little bit harder names, argue that mixed marital arts fighters do not view themselves as inherently violent or deviant, but rather a disciplined athletes engaging in controlled violence. This concept of caged morality reflects fighters' ability to compartmentalize their aggression within the ring, where violence is sanctions while maintaining a non-violent persona outside of it. Fighters justify their actions as part of a sport that requires skill, control, and respect, framing their participation as a form of mastery rather than deviance. Many mixed marital arts fighters lead conventional lives outside the ring, holding like middle class jobs, family roles, and responsibilities that conflict with their aggressive, intense nature of cage fighting. Authors highlight how fighters carefully manage their dual identities, adhering to the norm and expectations of both the subculture and mainstream society. By framing their participation in combat sports as a structured, role-based activity, they distance themselves from a stigma of uncontrolled or antisocial violence. Constructing and adhering to subcultural morals and values is important point in this article. Despite its aggressive nature, mixed marital arts emphasizes an internal code of ethics and values, value discipline, respect, and humility. Authors show that fighters in this subculture highly value respect for both opponents and the craft itself. This code contrasts with the perception of fighting is inherently deviant or chaotic, as fighters emphasize self-control and perseverance and honor in a way that lends their practice legitimacy and structure. Within MMA, there are established hierarchies where skill, technique, and experience are highly valued. These hierarchies create a structure and regulates behavior within the subculture, distinguishing true fighters from the perceived as mere thrill seekers. This distinction reinforces mixed martial arts as a serious, skill-based activity and pushes back against perceptions that is merely a violent, deviant pastime. The authors Abramson and Modzelewski also talks about social status and stratification within MLA. They focus on middle-class fighters, emphasizing how they navigate social status and respectability within and outside the ring. Middle-class fighters are often highly aware of the stigma associated with MMA and therefore develop strategies to manage public perception. This includes presenting themselves as disciplined and controlled athletes, downplaying the deviant aspects of cage fighting to align with more socially acceptable images. Success in mixed martial arts also provides social and symbolic capital within the subculture. For many fighters, achieving respect in the cage can compensate for a lack of recognition or authority in other areas of their lives. This subcultural capital reinforces the internal values of community, rewarding discipline, education, and skills over social status or wealth. Contradictions and limitations in caged morality always exist, and authors talk about managing social stigmas and the limits, while fighters construct caged morality to rationalize their engagement in combat sports. They still face social stigma. Despite the structured, well-based nature of MMA fighters, often the players or fighters encounter social perceptions that view their activities as violent or barbaric or deviant. This stigma can limit their social acceptance outside the subculture, forcing fighters to maintain a complex balance between their identities as athletes and their mainstream roles. The limits, when it comes to limits, Abramson and Modzelewski suggest that while fighters create moral boundaries within the sport, these boundaries cannot be tenuous, as the sport's reliance on violence inherently conflicts with mainstream values. This tension highlights the limitations of caged morality, showing how subcultures like MMA navigate yet cannot fully escape societal perceptions of deviance. In short, this study reveals that mixed martial arts fighters embody a unique form of deviance by creating their own subcultural moral frameworks to justify and legitimize their participation in combat sports. This caged morality shows fighters to balance the aggression required within the ring with the expectations and respectability outside it, creating a dual identity and challenges. That dual identity challenges societal norms while remaining grounded in the discipline and skills of that form of sport. Their research underscores the complexity of deviant subcultures like MMA, where participants actively contrast moral justifications and navigate social stratification to claim legitimacy, respect, and respect within a broader societal expectation that may view their sport as inherently deviant. And there are different sorts of subcultures. It's not only the form of sport itself, but the certain actions involved with sports groups that makes them a subcultural group as well. Football hooliganism refers to the violent and aggressive behavior exhibited by fans often before, during, or after football, soccer matches. In some countries in the world, it's called soccer. In some countries, it's called football. Depends where you are. This behavior includes fighting, vandalism, and other forms of unruly conduct, typically directed as fans of opposing teams, players, or even authorities like police. Hooliganism became especially prominent in European countries like UK during the late 20th century and has been associated with certain fan groups or firms that embrace their rowdy and often violent image. The motivations behind hooliganism are complex, often influenced by factors such as group identity, social status, and underlying social tensions. It is not merely about supporting a team, but also about affirming a sense of belonging, often through aggression and competition within rival fan groups. There is also a study of this sort of subculture by Danning, Murphy, and Williams in 1988, publishing The Roots of Football Hooliganism, a historical and sociological study. In this study, authors sought to investigate the deeper systemic causes behind the rise of hooliganism and British football. They approached hooliganism not simply as isolated incidents of violence, but as cultural phenomena influenced by broader social and economic conditions. Their work focused on understanding the historical context of hooliganism, examining the factors that transformed fan violence from sporadic incidents into organized and predictable behaviors among certain fan groups. Some of the key insights from their study, Danning and his colleagues found that football hooliganism has deep historical roots linked to social class and urbanization in the UK. They argued that hooliganism emerged from a working class culture that valued toughness and masculinity. This was particularly relevant in the post-industrial period as economic opportunities dwindled and young men in working class communities found themselves with limited prospects for upward mobility. Football became an outlet for expression and also served a way to prove loyalty and strength, with violence itself becoming a kind of social ritual that reinforces group cohesion or unity and status. There are some cultural and sociological influence to this process. The study highlighted that football hooliganism cannot be explained solely by individual psychology. Instead, it is shaped by larger cultural forcing. Authors pointed out how hooliganism became almost ritualistic, with films taking on names, organizing fights, and upholding certain codes of conduct. They noted that hooligan groups were highly organized, often communicating to arrange meetings and clashes with rival firms. In this sense, hooliganism functioned almost like a subculture with its own norms, codes, and internal hierarchies. So that's why we're studying this. When the sports involved not only athletes but also fan groups can develop or form subcultures. Economic challenges in the UK in 1970s and 80s, including unemployment and economic restructuring, also played a significant role. Many young men in the working class communities face diminished job prospects, leading to a sense of disenfranchisement, like um, that, and frustration. Football hooliganism offered a way to express these frustrations collectively together with other people. The authors argued that hooliganism was not simply random violence, but a response to marginalization and loss of traditional working class identity in the face of social and economic challenges or changes. Um, the authors also talked about the media implication and the public perception of hooliganism. They examined the role of media in shaping public perceptions of it. They found that media coverage often sensationalized or made it like very romanticized hooligan violence, portraying it as an uncontrollable epidemic that needed harsh responses. This coverage often glamorized hooligan culture, attracting more young men to the allure of the firm, if we can call it firm. By focusing on high profile clashes and the most violent incidents, the media played a role in reinforcing hooligan subculture, giving a sense of danger and notice, like people noticing it. The study concluded that hooliganism serves as a form of social commentary on class-based inequality and changing social structure. Football matches and fun rivalries became spaces where marginalized working class identities could be asserted, albeit in violent ways. Hooliganism is thus not just a violent activity, but a manifestation of deeper societal conflicts and tensions, where these individuals use violence as a way to communicate grievances and assert a shared identity. So this study is one of the most comprehensive analysis of football hooliganism, framing it as a historically rooted and culturally constructed phenomena rather than simply a form of delinquency. Their work illustrates how hooliganism emerges from the confluence of factors, including historical class struggles, group identity, masculinity, economic marginalization, and influence of media. By analyzing these themes, these elements, their research offers a nuanced understanding of why football hooliganism persists and why it is so resistant to purely punitive measures, suggesting that solutions need to address the underlying social and economic issues that fuel it. So also there are many other groups. I'm not going to, elaborate too much. For example, extreme sports subcultures, jumping freely, motocrossing. They are also form a deviant subculture within sports groups, and that's very important to review them. Extreme sports groups, which include enthusiastic of activities like skateboarding, surfing, rock climbing, snowboarding, base jumping. They are like also like a freestyle motocross. They are they are often considered deviant subcultures due to their countercultural values and willingness to push physical and social boundaries. These sports involve high risk elements, often in natural or urban environments where participants engage in intense adrenaline based fueled activities that defy mainstream conventions. Extreme sports participants are drawn to the thrill and the community and the sense of personal accomplishment, creating a subculture that values independence, individual expression, and resistance to conventional forms of sports or conventional norms. Some of the studies about risk taking is done by Laurendu Jason. He didn't go in doing skydive. That is published in 2006. And the author examines the base jumping, a highly dangerous and illegal the extreme sport, as a deviant subculture. The study explores how participants rationalize and normalize risk taking behavior using psychological techniques to manage fear and danger. Base jumpers often reject mainstream safety norms, emphasizing personal freedom and the pursuit of intense life threatening experience as part of their identity. Extreme sports frequently require participants to engage in high risk behaviors that challenge social norms around safety and responsibility. That already makes them deviant because they are deviating from the established norms. The many of them, it can be like a base jumping, parachuting of buildings or cliffs, is illegal in many areas due to the dangers involved, yet participants willingly accept these risks. This willingness to defy both legal restrictions and societal norms around self-preservation marks extreme sports as deviant. There is also other forms of deviant subcultures. For example, bodybuilding is a widely recognized sports. There is it exists in a deviant subculture within it, particularly in relation to the use of performance enhancing drugs or anabolic steroids. And many of these bodybuilders use these steroids, and often they can be even illegal. This subculture often operates outside of legal and ethical boundaries, pushing the human body beyond natural limits in pursuit of extreme results. There are also some studies, and I just picked one of them by Monaghan Lee, bodybuilding drugs and risk, published in 2001. The author studies bodybuilding subculture, particularly focusing on the use of performance enhancing drugs like anabolic steroids. He explores how drug use or steroid use is normalized in these subcultures, even though it is illegal and deviant by broader societal standards. And bodybuilders in this study, in this subculture, contrast their own ethical frameworks around drug use, viewing it as essential to achieving extreme physical goals. Extreme sports groups create their own fashion, their own language, their own rituals that set them apart. For example, skateboarding, that the players of skateboarders, whatever you call them, for instance, are known for their distinct streetwear and tricks vocabulary, which reflect their subculture's urban rebellious root. Surf culture has its own set of terms, values, and values around freedom and connection to nature and iconic visual style. And also, bodybuilders have their own understanding of terms, and I mean, all subcultures have their own styles and their norms. Um, they also have community and peer bonding, which is very important. Important. And then extreme sports groups often form close-knit communities with strong bonds between members who are united by their love for the sport and shared understanding of risks involved. These communities serve as a support network where members encourage and push each other to take on new challenges. The trust in the trust within these groups often become a central part of members' social lives, reinforcing their sense of belonging to a deviant subculture. So, why extreme sports are viewed as deviant? The deviance attributed to extreme sports is partly due to their high risk nature, which challenges social expectations of personal safety and responsibility. Additionally, these groups often operate in spaces not typically designed for recreation, for example, skateboarding on city streets, the other ones in other places. The physical risks and disregard for conventional safety measures highlight the deviance of mainstream cultural expectations around self-preservation, productivity, and conformity. As a result, extreme sports groups occupy a unique spaces in society where their love for intensive experiences, risk, and independence align them with deviant subcultures while also fostering rich, vibrant communities that celebrate their subcultural identity. So this is our lecture for today. In conclusion, deviant sports subcultures show us how sports can serve as a form of social resistance, challenging the established norms and creating alternative identities in groups, like group identities. They provide insight into how individuals and groups use sports as a platform to express deviance, individuality, and rebellion against mainstream culture. I hope you learned quite a bit about deviant sports subcultures, how we relate them to subcultures, and what is the element of deviance from mainstream society when it comes to deviant sports subcultures. Thank you for listening and watching this lecture, and I will see you or talk to you in our next lectures. Bye.